Moving on, Caleb Belchak says, is there a universal story that appeals to every individual? If so, what is it, and how do we harness it? Once again, I'm indebted to McKee in his book. He says that there have been, throughout history, going back to Aristotle, the Greeks, and so on, they could isolate that there were maybe 7 different stories, and then some German guys said, no, there's 36, not 37. You know, and you could say, well, the love story is one, and the redemption story is one, and all these other things, so on and so on and so forth. I don't know how many different stories there are. I'll bet it's not more than 7, though. I'll bet you every single story ever told is one of 5 or 6. You can make the case, if you get a little loose with your definitions, that there's really only one story. But whether or not you can get everything into this one bucket, I don't really care. I think there's only one story. Let me rephrase that. There's only one story that I'm interested in. And every story that I've ever liked is that story. And it's the story of the hero. It's the journey of the hero. Joseph Conrad described that journey of the hero in a I guess it was an essay or an article he wrote, which we used to do in the planetarium show when I was 13 years old. It's the first time I ever heard this. He talked about the collective unconscious and how various cultures and societies have very similar motifs that go all the way through. And one of the motifs that apparently is every culture in the world throughout time and space has told the same story, and it's the journey of the hero. And that is the story I'm interested in. And after having understood the power of that story, I rewrote Aurora to incorporate this. Big Bad Problems, same thing. It's very easy when you don't understand this is the essence of conservative politics too, by the way, right? You go around, this is a happy diversion. I think this might be the only thing in this show that actually has genuine meaning. You go around as a young writer and you think that you're going to just write things. You're just going to write them, and you're going to come up with things, and okay, cool. And you don't have to worry about what's happened in the past. That's old news. You know, you're young and you're new, and you're going to figure it all out. And you're going to do something completely different that's never been done before. Well, there's a 3-act structure in the screenplay, and the first act has to end at 30, and the second act has to end at page 90, and the film has to be done by 120 pages. 3 acts. Not me, man. I'm doing 7 acts, and I'm going to write a 422-page screenplay, and I'm going to show the world. It's true in life, and it's true in arts as well. Everybody has been somewhere. There's no place you can go where someone hasn't been. Everybody is walking in somebody else's footsteps, and it's probably been true even in the Greeks. They were walking in other people's footsteps. The storytelling is so deeply wired into our human intelligence and our psyches that we don't really understand how primal it is. It's almost like hemoglobin. It's just everywhere, the story structure. But the story I'm interested in is the journey of the hero, and it's in all different cultures. And I think, excuse me, a nasty little tickle cough that I can't shake. I'll give you a couple of examples of the power of this, because this story is the essential story. 3 great examples. I talked about this in that essay I did called Shards. Luke Skywalker is the same character as Aragorn, who's the same character as Arthur, and in slight variations is the same character as Superman. And the classic story of the journey of the hero is this. You start out with a farm boy. If you think about it, Luke Skywalker's a farm boy. He's on a moisture farm. Aragorn is a wandering strider. He's a ranger. He's a guy who sits in the back of a pub. Joseph Campbell. I'm sorry, I think I said Joseph Conrad. Arthur is a page, and Superman's a kid out in the country. Clark Kent, just a boy. So you've got these characters who have no understanding of their uniqueness. They haven't been raised uniquely. They weren't raised as princes. They were raised in very common backgrounds, but each one of them has a yearning. Each one of them suspects that there's something inside them that's not being fulfilled. Each one of them knows that they're not like other people. They don't get along with the rest of the kids. So these characters are called to a quest. They have prior to the inciting incident. The inciting incident is the thing that kicks the story into gear. Prior to that happening, there's a certain vague dissatisfaction in their lives. They know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is. They just want to move, and they can't figure it out. And then the inciting incident happens. And so what is the inciting incident? Well, in Star Wars, Luke is a farm boy, and Next thing you know, his family's been killed, and 2 pages later, he's in some old man's cabin out in the middle of nowhere, and he sees a princess who's calling for help, and his life is never the same after that. Not only does that send Luke on his journey, but it's what Luke has been waiting for. He doesn't know it, but that's what his entire life has been leading up to. He's been waiting to be called, waiting to be called. Aragorn is sitting in a pub, and all of a sudden the ring of power comes into his presence, and he is called to escort and protect that kid. And yet Aragorn is still very conflicted. He's not the king. He's just a ranger. He doesn't want to be king. Clark Kent, is out there, and he's not allowed to run fast, and he's not allowed to throw the football, and he's not allowed to play baseball, he's not allowed to fly, he's not allowed to do any of those things because of the decency of his father. Superman's a slightly different case for a number of reasons. But he's basically alone out there in the middle of nowhere, not aware of who he is or not being able to be who he is, and his inciting incident is his father has a heart attack and dies. And Arthur, of course, is just a page boy, and his inciting incident is he pulls this sword out of the stone. And so what happens is these characters go on this journey, and along the journey they meet allies and adversaries. They meet an adversary of pure evil, Darth Vader or Sauron or Mordred or the rest of the people arrayed against Arthur. And over the course of their journey, they're aided by a certain number of sort of archetypical characters. The wizard is one. The wizard is Gandalf, or the wizard is Obi-Wan Kenobi, or the wizard is Merlin. An old man who was once a warrior is now too old to be a warrior, but his wisdom is still intact, even though his physical strength isn't there. He meets a rogue. In the case, a rogue is somebody who's more of a warrior than he is. He's even a better warrior than our protagonist. He's an expert. He's older. He's more mature. He's more experienced. That rogue character can be Lancelot, or it can be, oh gosh, what's his name? Oh my God, Boromir. Boromir is a mighty warrior, even compared to Strider. He's a mighty warrior, and Lancelot is a mighty warrior, and Han Solo is a mighty warrior. And so these people aid him, and they're tricksters and jesters and all the rest. And they go on this quest, usually to rescue a woman or to rescue something or other, and then they come to the moment of truth. Now, what's interesting about Arthur and Luke and Aragorn is what they are having to do, all three of them, is they have to set right the world that their fathers had screwed up. Arthur's father, Uther, destroyed his kingdom for one night of sex with Arthur's mom, and Arthur is the child of that. Uther Pendragon destroyed his kingdom out of lust. Aragorn's father is actually his great 32 generations before father, but it's essentially his father. His father cut the ring off of Sauron's hand, but did not destroy the ring. He kept it. He kept the power. He chose the power. Uther chose the power. Luke Skywalker's father chose the power and became Darth Vader. So each one of these three young heroes is suffering from seeing the world that they love turned into desolation by the actions of their fathers. And all three of them fear assuming their roles as kings because all three of them are afraid they're going to fail the same test that their fathers failed and make things worse. Aragorn is afraid that if he becomes the king, he will fail at the moment of truth in the way that Isildur failed. And Arthur is afraid that he will fail in the way that Uther failed, and Luke is afraid that he will fail in the way that Anakin failed. And so each one of these three heroes makes a decision to walk away from power at the cost of their own life. Arthur throws Excalibur back into the lake. Aragorn hands the ring back to Frodo and then goes on a suicide mission to give him time. And Luke throws his lightsaber down a pit and says, I'm not going to fight you. I'm a Jedi like my father. You're going to have to kill me. And by walking away from the power, by turning their backs on the power, they do what George Washington did. They turn their backs on power, and by walking away from the power, all three of them suddenly become worthy of the power. That's the test. The test is, do you want ultimate, all-controlling power? All three of their fathers said yes. All three of the sons said no. And by saying no to the power that was offered to them, all three of these sons succeed in a place where all three of the fathers failed, and they then become the actual kings who make the world right again. Arthur becomes the king, even though there's kind of a downturned ending there. Arthur and Arthur's Camelot lives on in people's minds forever, lives on in Avalon. The idea that Camelot existed gets us through the Dark Ages. Aragorn becomes the king. He doesn't just become a powerful warrior, he becomes the king. Boromir saw that he was a king before Aragorn saw that he was himself a king. And of course, Luke Skywalker becomes the king. And the great example in terms of clarity of the power of this story, of the power of the journey of the hero, is Luke Skywalker. And I'll tell you why. It's because, I should, if I was actually sitting behind the console as well as running it, I'd be doing a lot more of these kind of things. The reason that Star Wars is the definitive journey of the hero story, count all three movies as one movie, right? Act 1 is A New Hope, Act 2 is the Empire Strikes Back, Act 3 is the Return of the Jedi. The reason that movie is so profoundly illustrative to talk about is because nowhere else is the journey of the hero as clear as it is in the Star Wars trilogy. Only because Luke is so unbelievably, spectacularly uninteresting. He's such an uninteresting character throughout the first movie. He is just, the whole first movie is him whining, complaining, I want to go to the, why are we doing this? Oh, it hurts. Oh, what happens if I push this button? It's like, no. He's got a goal, but he's incompetent, and he's kind of unformed, and he's a crybaby, and he's soft, and he's weak, and he doesn't know what he wants. So why would we know what he wants? Meanwhile, everybody around Luke in the first movie is crystal clear and interesting. Leia's interesting. She doesn't change. Han doesn't change. Even though you find out he's got a heart of gold, we already knew that. Han doesn't change. Leia doesn't change. The robots don't change. Obi-Wan doesn't change. And Darth Vader surely doesn't change until the very, very end. But Luke changes. The first film, he's a callow youth. By the time you get into Empire Strikes Back, you immediately see that Luke is no longer quite as callow as he used to be. He's not quite the jerk he used to be. In the second movie, Luke goes on a quest of his own free will. He's not forced to go on a quest. Something in him realizes that he can be much bigger than he is. And he goes to Yoda's planet and Dagobah? Anyway, he goes to Yoda's planet and forces himself to humble himself in front of this small creature. And that's the beginning of Luke's transition. That's the beginning of Luke becoming a Jedi, is to put away what he used to think he was and become something else. So Luke goes on this quest in the second movie, and when he's confronted by Darth Vader in the core of the Cloud City, he's basically given a choice of his life. Here's your life. Not only your life, but your life and power versus death. Join me and we'll rule the galaxy as father and son. We'll bring order back to the universe. And Luke looks at this decision and realizes, I am your father. Luke says, he is offering my life and power in exchange for enslaving everyone else. It's better to die than join him. And Luke commits suicide. Nobody really realizes that, but that's exactly what he does. He jumps off of this thing. He doesn't know that there's going to be a ramp down there. Luke commits suicide rather than join his father. That's another act of heroism and humility. It's another choice that Anakin wouldn't have made and didn't make. Finally, in the third movie, Luke is calmer, quieter. He bursts into rage at the climax of all three movies. The climax of all three films is when Luke is having that final fight with Darth Vader and just starts wailing on him because all of the control that he learned from Yoda, all of the control of being a Jedi goes away. He's filled with burning rage and he starts hacking at his father, determined to kill him. And what Luke realizes in that moment is that this is the hatred of the dark side. There's no way to control it. I've been trying to control it all my life. I had all the lessons from Yoda. Doesn't matter. I get filled with such rage and hatred that I'm ready to kill my father, and I'm not going to do it. And the moment, all three Star Wars movies, the moment that those three movies come into focus is the moment that Luke Skywalker turns off that lightsaber, throws it away, and says, I'm not going to join you. I'll never join you. I'm a Jedi like my father. That's what it's all about. That's why it resonates with people. It's why Star Wars is Star Wars and not Ice Pirates. It's not the special effects. People think it's the special effects, but we saw a lot of special effects in the second trilogy, which was utterly ridiculous from top to bottom. Inhuman, robotic, absurd nonsense. Sterile, horrible, worthless dreck. But those first three movies or about something. And the reason people love Star Wars is not because of TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon. People love Star Wars because it's about the things that matter. It's about everybody. The reason, see, now we're into the guts of why it works, not just how it works. The reason the journey of the hero works is because it appeals to everything in everybody. The beautiful thing about the story of the journey of the hero is that the person begins as a farm boy, right? He's a ranger covered in mud. He's a farm boy who's first forced to go back and do another year on the farm. He's a page who's designed to carry the armor of obnoxious, arrogant knights and constantly be beaten and humiliated. And the reason this story has the power that it has is because everybody connects to that hero, because everybody on some level feels that spark of divinity inside themselves. Everybody wants to think that they could be a Jedi, that they could be a king, a good king. Everybody wants to think that they could be the person to pull the sword from the stone. Think about that, by the way. Has anyone ever read The Sword in the Stone and heard the legend of Arthur removing Excalibur from this giant boulder and not had the thought, I think I could do it? Everybody thinks they can do it. And I don't think most people think they'd use strength. The people watch that story and they think, could I pull this sword from the stone? The question isn't, could I pull the sword from the stone because am I strong enough? The question is, could I pull the sword from the stone because am I good enough? I used to think about that, pulling a sword from a stone when I was a little kid. I used to think about getting up on my feet and hauling and pulling on it as hard as I can. I think now, if I was confronted with a sword and a stone, I would go up there and I'd grasp the hilt of that sword as gently as I possibly could. I'd just barely touch it. And I'd clear my mind of any ambition or anything, and I would simply clear my mind, and I'd pull as lightly as I could. That'd be the only hope you would have, I think. Who knows? But people start asking themselves that question even though they don't know it, and they want to be Luke Skywalker. You think you want to be Han Solo, and I wanted to be Han Solo in the first movie. I thought Han Solo was 100 times more interesting than Luke. He is. He starts out more interesting, but Luke goes someplace and Han doesn't. Han in movie 3 is no different than Han in movie 1. He's a rogue, he's sexy, he's cool, he's got a bad ride, and all the girls want to be with him, and there's all of that benefit. But when you see the end of the third movie, Luke Skywalker is a king. He's beyond popularity. He's beyond being cool. He's beyond all of these things. It doesn't matter to him anymore. It's a transcendental transformation. So this is the story. And when I was writing Big Bad Problems, I had a, try to find your hero. Who's the hero? And then for a long time, I thought, well, I know who I want the hero to be. But whenever I would tell people the story of this story, he was always the least interesting person. And everybody said, maybe you got the wrong hero. And I thought, no, I've got the right guy. The reason he's the least interesting person is because the journey of the hero that person has to start out weak, cowardly, conflicted, soft, desperate, lonely, scared. They have to start that way so that they can go into someplace that isn't that through the arc of the story. They change. No one else changes. That's really important. No one else changes. Lord TO3 there said, referring to pulling the sword out of the stone, the question you'd ask yourself is, can I do it because I'm pure enough? That's exactly correct. Am I pure enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough to get this sword out of the stone? Because it's not going to take strength. It's going to take purity and goodness. So all of these things hit mystical chords in people. And it doesn't have to be a giant thing, It's this story about the hero and the quest is that you can make the case that, this is what I was saying earlier, that you can get around with the semantics a little bit, but you can make the case that virtually every story ever told is the journey of the hero. The question isn't because do they want to save the kingdom? The question is, what do they want? Do they want a love affair that they missed? Is it, is Sleepless in Seattle the story of the journey of a hero about a man who decides to, go after the thing they want and take the risk? Or is it her story or, whatever? But that's the story I understand. There are other stories, I suppose, but that's the one I understand. And this kind of goes to Aloe Constant's next question, which